Life in Letters.
The presenting sponsor of My Life in Letters is sprayplanet.com. This is where you go to get everything MTN colors, be it 94, hardcore, whatever it is, go check them out. They're also the distributor of Crink products, Posca markers, and Grog inks. So go check out sprayplanet.com right now, order something, and go make your mark. But without further ado, let's get into this next episode. My Life in Letters. There's no one on the phone today. It's just me. This is episode 51, and that's going to lead us into next week's episode 52, which is going to mark 1 year of programming. It's kind of amazing to think about it. 1 year, at 52 weeks, I have not missed a week, and I'm proud of that. You know, it's actually taken me a little bit of time to realize that it's kind of a big deal. I know firsthand how much work it's taken, and it feels like a lot of work. But I talked to some other people, and they are like, yo, that's just so much content. And it's true, 52 hours of content. I should say soon to be 52 hours of content or more. And it's been crazy. It's been a hell of a year for the podcast, and it's been a hell of a year for the graffiti community. It's been a hell of a year for the national and global community with the state of politics and the state of affairs in this country and beyond. And so, what I had been thinking about doing was, how do I communicate to you guys what's about to happen after episode 52, after 1 year of programming? And I've been mentioning little things here and there about how we're going to take a break, we're going to rebrand, we're going to recharge and just kind of rejuvenate. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later as to what that's going to be. But I wanted to just take some time to speak with you guys and girls about what's going to go down. I respect everybody listening. In fact, the support has been pretty amazing. And although I will tell you right now that I'm going to ask you guys for more. I'm actually going to ask for a lot more. And I don't feel bad about that, because I've worked my ass off, and I'm planning to continue to work my ass off. And I do it in service of something bigger than me. And I think what I wanted to tell you guys today is a little bit of the background, even though you may know the background of this podcast, but maybe this is your first time listening, which would be awesome and crazy that this is your first episode. But I have been thinking about something like My Life in Letters for a long time. 10 years is when the idea first popped into my head. So I'd been living in New York City for about 6 years. I moved here in 2001. I'm in Brooklyn right now. I moved here in 2001 after having almost 10 years of an active bombing career in San Francisco. So I started bus hopping in 1992 as a junior in high school. Went to School of the Arts in San Francisco, and every friend that I wanted to be friends with at that school was a tagger. Being a tagger was a good thing, it was a cool thing, and our school was chock full of writers. And by 1992, everything was established. And that city had a vibrant bus hopping scene, had a decade of good, solid graph under its belt, more than a decade. And I was honored to be a part of the lineage of that. And with that came this whole set of fun tools and experiences that I was not used to, ultra wide markers, SGs, streakers, pilots, getting ink, all the ritual that was associated with graffiti in 1992 for me is totally intoxicating. And this is, I was introduced to graffiti much earlier, probably 84 was when graffiti kind of landed on my radar. And that was through MTV, through certain movies like I think Breakin' and a couple other early 80s movies about New York hip hop culture. And they just included some graffiti. I hadn't seen Style Wars or anything like that, or any true literature on graffiti yet. So I had done bubbles, and I had done some lettering, and I had tagged on bathrooms and things like that in the 80s. But this was, I can't, I don't count those years. 1992 was when I started truly writing, and I'll get to like a definition of when people start later from a quote from one of my guests. But I bombed from 92 until 2001. And I left San Francisco for various reasons and moved to New York City. Took a break from graph for about 5 years. 2002 is when I kind of, just went back to school and just started doing things here in the city. And graph didn't seem to be a part of it. So I set the cans down for a while, even though I always sketched. I always caught tags. Like I always just had a marker in my pocket, but I wasn't like doing it as a religious thing the way I was in SF for almost the past 10 years. Like it was my religion. It was it was just a way to breathe. It was air to me, graph. But that changed in 2002, 2003. And it was when I started writing again in 2007 that this idea of this documentation came up. I thought, wow, like this graph has really done a lot for me. I had that was the first time I had that realization that graffiti culture, the community had really given me a lot more than I was aware of. And I wanted to do something to give back. And at that time I don't even know if podcasts existed in 2007. Certainly weren't part of my life, but I was reading a lot and, I was, things were on my mind about documentation. And I actually at that time thought, I could maybe just call people up, sit down with them, record it and then transcribe it and then put it into like a book or put it into something. But that was unrealistic at the time. And it took me until 2016 to really do it. And in 2016, I had already had conversations with a lot of people over the years. In fact, one of my guests, Crayon, real inspiration for me growing up. I had spoken with him many years before 2016. Maybe it was 2012 or 13. We bumped into each other, and I said, "Hey, I'm interested in doing interviews or whatever." And he was cool. He was like, "Yeah, sure, anytime." Which I still couldn't get it together. But so in 2016, I had just finished grad school, and that was a big shift for me, going back to grad school and studying product design. And what we got in grad school that was really interesting for my career. Well, I should say what was interesting for me as someone producing a podcast was we were taught about human-centered design. And so human-centered design, it involves it should involve tons of interviewing. You want to interview the users of the product, right? That you're trying to make or fix or whatever it is. And that interview style, I don't really do it in a traditional way at all on the podcast, but there are elements of it in how I interview people. And I had to do a lot of interviews for my thesis work in grad school. And so I had just, finished doing, I don't know what it was, 15 interviews for this big project that I worked on all year, my second year. And so when I left school, I thought, oh, well, I have this ability to kind of interview, and I've always been able to talk to people. And so and then podcasts were there, and they'd become a pretty strong medium. So spoke with a couple people, including my neighbor, Zach Dunn. And Zach has, had audio editing background, history, experience. And I said, hey, I want to do this thing. And we kicked the idea around a little bit. And he said, we should kind of plot it out and plan it and curate it, which was very smart, actually. Very smart idea. And thank you, Zach. But I totally abandoned that and said, no, fuck that. I want to just do this shit today and put it out tomorrow because I have been waiting 10 years to do this. I'm sick of it. I'm going to do it. And oftentimes the way we were taught in school, that's how prototyping works. You make a rapid prototype and you put it into the world immediately to get feedback, right? It doesn't matter if it's made of duct tape and chopsticks and, little light bulb. A prototype gives a user something to look at, hold, touch, listen to, whatever, so they can give you feedback so you can make it better. So that's what we did. I had, just recently developed a friendship with ZMAD, Luis Lamboy, from the Bronx, longtime writer, short-time friend. We'd only known each other for a little while, but Luis is such a cool guy. I said, hey, you want to do an interview about your history on my podcast? So Luis was episode 1, and it was super fun. The quality of our first 12 or 15 episodes, it's pretty poor, and I don't apologize for 1 second. It was that minimum viable product. It was that rapid prototype. You heard it. All I figured was if I can record it and get good content and you hear it, that's it. That's a success. And I did that. Starting with ZMAD, it wasn't very calculated. He's just a good guy, huge history, influenced a lot of people, still has style. And like, dude is nice with the cans today. And he's gone through some struggles. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But he was a perfect way to kick off the pod. And I'm really grateful to ZMAD for doing it. It started a lot. He also recommended Crash, John Matos, to come on a few episodes later. And that's huge. And I still get to interview men and women who I admire so much, back in the day, I just straight up jocked them. I mean, that was the word that we use. I don't know if you kids are still using that word, but Doug 1, episode 2, Doug from TMF in San Francisco, true living legend in graffiti. This is a king in every respect with the cans and the markers. He did it all. And he did it in the Bay, and they did it with so much style and class. It was ridiculous. And I grew up seeing TMF and just admired, just jocked it, and everybody did. If you say that you grew up in the Bay and that you weren't jocking what TMF and Doug and Dean and Bizarro, what they were doing, you're lying. You're just a liar. And it was an honor to have him on. You know, I got to speak with my mentor, one of my mentors, Neon from BA Crew, and Neon was episode 3, and that was again to like honor this culture, honor this system that I got brought into, and mentorship was a big deal to me, and still is a big deal to me. And so having one of my mentors on was imperative. And it just went like that. Like Crayon was episode 4, then Crash, and then Persuade, and then episode 7 was Amuse 126, which of the names I just mentioned, Amuse, you know, he's the young, you know, hot boy, just like doing it like really uniquely. And Amuse happens to just be one of the greatest humans that I know. Nothing but pure positivity, nothing but kindness, totally humble, totally empathetic, ill with the cans. And the audio quality is terrible. And also, I should say, this is not a knock to Zach, my former producer. I was doing recordings with a little Zoom recorder that was terrible. And I was recording, I didn't even have the brains to connect my iPhone to the Zoom recorder. I was just doing shit on speakerphone in just like a closet in my house. This is ridiculous. And, you know, for better or for worse, I interviewed all these legends in those first 12 or whatever episodes before I got aboard and got a mic. But, you know, back to Amuse, like having a guy like him on was changed things for me and him as on a friend level. And then I think added a new layer of spice to the podcast, because before that, many of the people that I mentioned in those first 6 episodes, they're active, but they're not active like Amuse, and they're not active like this kid. And so having him on was a gift, you know. I mean, but every single gift, you know. Chris from Robots Will Kill, who later, when Zach left the podcast, because Zach went on to do bigger and better things, Chris introduced me to Christopher Piccioni, who is my producer to this day. Chris took over at episode 13, and he's just been killing it ever since, and I'm really grateful. And, you know, I get, again, to talk with people in my crew like Apex and Cycle and A-Rec and Joker and more, you know, and that is, again, that byproduct of being able to chop it up with my friends, but then also being able to talk with dudes that I just grew up idolizing, like the people I mentioned, or episode 9, Scoo from ICP and TMF. Maybe if there's one regrettable comment I've made in 51 weeks, I told Scoo in his episode, yeah, you know, TMF is dead. Man, I never received more blowback from a comment than that. And so let me just put it on record. I know TMF is alive in many of us. So, and, you know, I'm nothing if not transparent. You know, we wanted to add like diversity, and I noticed by the time we got to around the time of Scoo's episode that you know, we hadn't interviewed any women. Episode 16 was a new bar was set when I interviewed Spy from TDK, TMC. Spy is a friend and another just a huge influence, huge role model for me in graffiti and everyone in the Bay. And getting him on was a real blessing. We're going to have him on again. But it did start to speak to me. I should also actually say, Spy was one of the first graph artists I knew, doing politically charged graffiti in San Francisco. There was a lot of it, of course. There's always been a political edge to the Bay Area and an edge of activism in the Bay Area. But Eric Spy really was always doing it for indigenous people, for workers' rights, for so many important causes. Spy has educated, he's educated hundreds of thousands of people. I'm just going to say that, maybe even more. He certainly educated me. And having him on reminded me even more about how this lack of diversity on the podcast was happening. And so, we had Merlot on episode 17. She was the first woman that we got to have on the podcast. And that was really important because women's voices in our culture, just in our culture, I was going to say in our graph culture, but in our culture, women's voices are muffled. They are silenced. There's a war on women. I've mentioned it before. I'll continue to mention it because it pisses me off. I was raised by women and they're not treated right still. And in our culture, even worse. I've heard things that people have said to female writers that are friends of mine that piss me off. And it's not funny, And so anyway, we had Merlot on, which was huge. And, we also had Diva on, and Diva. So I'm again, like, nothing but transparent. I didn't know Diva as a person before she came on. I knew of her work, but I won't lie. She didn't have a big influence on me. I wasn't here in the 90s when she was really rocking. When TPA, when those guys were like really, really doing it, I didn't know it. And so what I did know was that she was battling cancer. Her name is Tabitha, and Tabitha was, diagnosed with cancer and had just didn't have the insurance to cover it. So she was traveling to and from Mexico to get treatments down there, and it was costly. And she had a GoFundMe page, and I have a personal connection to cancer. All of us do, I think, at this point. And we had her on. It was an incredible interview. I wanted to just, really I wanted to highlight her GoFundMe as much as we could. We wanted to get as many people as we could listening to donate to her GoFundMe. And I heard that we made there was a significant spike right after her episode came out. So I'm pretty proud of that. And, not long after she was on, she passed. She died of cancer. And, it was painful for me, but I know it was devastating for her family and for her friends. And we wanted to do more. We did a fundraiser to try to get more money to her family to pay for costs. And I started realizing at that point that the awareness of cancer in the graph community was getting no shine. And that made me think about a lot of the social issues. I mean, I mentioned the war on women, or how women are treated in our culture. Those things are super critical for us to be talking about, pushing back on, challenging, and it's not happening enough. And there's, and it's because there's a whole lot of, well, that's not cool. It's not fun to talk about. It's ugly. It's painful. It's sad. And you know what? That's all true. And for a lot of us, it's just a reality that we may or may not face a terminal illness. And I think by not talking about it is it's not helping. At the same time, privately, I had been contacted by Luis, by ZMAD, and he told me that he was battling cancer. And that was very hard news to take. But I'm so proud of that guy to say that he's beaten it. And he is living cancer free today, and that's amazing. And I know he's doing a lot to stay healthy, the way he eats and exercises. He also had the benefit of having healthcare here in the States. He didn't have to travel like Diva had to. Again, like even just our healthcare within treating terminal illnesses, our healthcare system is so broken, and it affects the graffiti community. And here's the thing about these social issues that I am charged by and I'm going to keep talking about is that they affect the graffiti community directly. We're not these invincible fucking 15-year-olds who can just go out bombing and have silver chrome paint all over your face, which means you inhaled it and absorbed it and all that shit. It's like we just can't like pretend. And it's fucking stupid to pretend when you're 30 years old, 40 years old, still painting that you're some invincible fucking kid. It's just fucking, it's not sustainable. And so, you know, the podcast, I think, took a shift around the time that Diva passed. And, you know, as dark as it is, 2000, when I started this podcast in October 2016, the election results in November 2016 are still heavy on my mind. But also there was a lot of loss in the past 12 months in the graffiti community. And, you know, I have like a short list of names. It's actually a pretty long list of names. This is not in order. This is not by importance. But what I did want to do is, it's totally like people don't take moments of silence on podcasts, but this is my podcast, so I don't give a fuck. So we're going to do that because we lost so many friends. We lost Vandal. We lost Trey. We lost Cure. We lost Diva. We lost Orphan. We lost Stack. We lost MF1. We lost Acne. We lost Scan. And we lost Rapes. There's more. I apologize if I am spacing out on any other friends in this community that we had to bury in the past 12 months. Not intentional. This list, these are people that I knew for the most part. And it's pretty, I didn't want to spend much more time digging up names. So we're going to take a moment of silence on a podcast right now. And I think, you know, whatever, you hate it or you don't, you stop the episode here. That's fine. But I got more to say after this pause. You know, it's going to continue too. We hear a lot of, you know, fuck 2017 or fuck 2016. And it's like, well, you know what? That's absolutely right. It's a hard year. The older you get, the more friends are going to die. That's a fact of life. You know, I'm kind of more interested in fuck cancer and fuck mental illness and fuck heroin and fuck, you know, suicide and fuck unhealthy lifestyle choices that should be called out by friends. You know, like I have friends now that are caught up in opiate addiction and alcohol addiction and other drug addiction. And, you know, is it cool to call them on that shit? No. Is it uncomfortable? Totally uncomfortable. Might you lose a friend? Yes. Can you sleep better at night if you do it? I know I have. You know, I have. I've had friends, good friends, ask me for fucking clean piss to give to their PO. And I said, fuck you, no. I'm not that kind of friend to you. You go find some other friend that'll piss in your cup. I'm not that guy that's going to give you my piss. Get clean and give your own piss. And that's some tough love shit. And, you know, that's how I am rolling right now. And with at least some of my friends. But I will say that, you know, addiction is part of mental illness and it deserves compassion. It deserves compassion until you can't have any more compassion, but it deserves that. It deserves that empathy and that kindness. And sometimes being kind is being brutally honest. You know, all the loss of life reminds me of how much we can celebrate the life that we have now. You know, and I talk to people that have been doing this since, God, I mean, almost longer than I've been living. Part 1, episode 31, when we interview Part, that guy started writing in 72. And he still's nice with the cans. He still puts it down on walls. That's a celebration. That man, that just the fact that in 72 he picked up a can, and in 2017 he's still picking up a can. That's incredible. and that deserves to be highlighted and celebrated. Right after part was when we had on Scheme on the episode 33, and that was nuts. That was nuts. 10 minutes into that interview, I was like, holy! I was thinking in my head, fuck, I'm talking to Scheme, 3-yard king. Like the Style Wars scenes, the kitchen with his mom, that kind of iconic imagery is just like seared, fired and wired in our brains. And he said one of the greatest quotes, because I used to spend some time, I still do sometimes with more old school guys, about defining generations of graph writers. What years, literally, like what are the moments, the months or the years that break up a generation? And he had some really interesting thoughts on that. He broke up generations by sometimes just a couple of years, 2 years to 2 years to the next 3 years. Now, he also said, and I mentioned this earlier when quoting when you started writing, a lot of people will say that, like I said, in the 80s, I was doing little bubble tags on paper and in bathrooms and, at the side of the jukebox at the pizza restaurant that I used to go to as a kid. But that I wasn't doing graffiti because I didn't know the rules. And so Scheme told me it's when you understand the rules of this game that you're in. And for me, that was 1992. I forget what it was for Scheme. It might have been 79 or 80. And if I got that wrong, forgive me, Scheme. His episode was followed by Anger, was an old school LA cat. Then we had Bio from Tats, and then we had Suffer, another just young. Well, shit, you ain't that young, Suff, but you are active and doing it, and it's really interesting. That was episode 36, and I'll tell you, we hit a plateau. I think that episode, I believe that week we got about 6,000, almost 7,000 downloads. That's pretty tremendous for a podcast about such a niche area of design or of art. And total transparency, the numbers have been going down ever since. Okay, and here's the thing. This. I'll talk more about it at the end about the rebrand, but our numbers have continued to go down. And I have no problem being transparent about that. I don't have an ego around this. The numbers are going down so much that I've been trying to figure out what's going on. And I just can't, I don't have the Google genie to tell me why the numbers are so low or are so much lower. But what I realized is that after talking with some really wise people, way smarter than me in this podcast game, maybe just smarter than me in general, is now's the time to experiment and play. Numbers are down. If people aren't listening or downloading, well, maybe it's a sign, and we got to listen to the users. We got to listen to you guys as to what is going on. But I will say this now, and I'll say it again. I need feedback. I've gotten a ton of support, like lots of likes and thumbs up and, great emoji support. But what I really have needed for a long time are emails telling me shit. In a year, we've gotten like 5 reviews on iTunes. Like I gotta say, like, it's disappointing, because, I figured like I'm working my ass off. 6,000 people a week were downloading. It takes a second to write a review. And those reviews, they're huge. They really start to push podcasts forward. And beyond a review, also just like sending me messages. The Gmail account is up. You can DM. I've wanted and needed feedback for so long and haven't gotten enough. So that I'm about to take some stabs in the dark as to ways to make the podcast better, more approachable, more enjoyable, something that people want to share, something people want to review, and something that people, just have to be subscribed to. So every Sunday, they get that dose, and that dose of the culture. And, I'm like looking at some of the other episodes that came after Suffer, and these are incredible artists that we had on here. Rambo, News from Inkheads, Days, original Days. We got like legends like Daver, episode 40 from Baltimore, Hammer, Reno, someone that in the Bay, Reno's was another one that just The dude's hand styles and his ethic were infectious. Reno's episode 42. Finally got to do my first part 2 with Dave Persway, episode 44. There's a whole lot of part 2s coming, and not quite sure how we're going to do it yet. And that brings us, up to right now, this episode 51 that you're listening to. I wanted to tell you guys more I wanted to honor you by giving you information as to what's about to happen, right? And I'll tell you some of the ideas that we have, and maybe you'll say, oh, that sucks. So again, here's a chance to get some feedback via DM, via mylifeinletterspodcast@gmail.com, or those of you who are my friends, just text me, call me, email, whatever. We're thinking about going 30 minutes. Actually, I should start over. I met a guy named Terrence Mickey. He started a design firm called Narrative. Then he worked for StoryCorps. He's worked for all these podcasts. He runs his own amazing podcast called Memory Motel. And Terrence was nice enough to meet up with me. He's nice enough to continue to support me. And some of his ideas, which I'm taking, are you can go 2 ways with a podcast, essentially. You can go oral history, which is what My Life in Letters has been for 50 weeks now. Or you can go towards a more curated episode. And so in the case of looking at my numbers being down and thinking about how much it actually takes to create an hour-long episode every week, it's a pretty easy choice for me to say, oh yeah, let's try a 25-minute episode style and get away from the oral history and actually curate much, much more. And so one thing that we're going to be changing is moving away from this style of oral history. And the casuality of this podcast will remain. It'll always be a conversational experience, as if you just get to kind of, put your ear against the door and listen to 2 other people talking. I want that. But we're going to move away from the long oral history, and we're going to get more pointed, and we're going to get more focused and talk about maybe isolated moments in a writer's career, as opposed to trying to create a timeline like we did the first year. I'm proud of the way we did this first year, but we will go in a different direction starting soon. Terrence also mentioned context, and I've heard this actually from a lot of listeners. So this is one of the things I've gotten some of the most feedback on, is having context about who's about to get interviewed would be really helpful. So spending a minute, 2 minutes, maybe 3 at the most, although I think that's long. Although shit, I've been talking for 30 minutes on this. But talking for a couple minutes at the top of an episode, setting up the listener for what they're about to hear, who they're hearing it from, why that person matters, what influence they've had on the culture, and what they're going to get basically by listening for 30 minutes. And then after that context is established, non-graffiti people will understand a little bit more about what they're about to hear. Terrence said to me, I love the podcast, and but I don't know the culture of the people. And so I would start to lose it if I didn't know you, and I didn't know the friend who recommended you, and I didn't know your background. And so setting up context is going to start happening. So the form might look like that. And me talking for a few minutes, going into a 20 or 15, 18, 20-minute clip, whatever it is. And I wrap it up with a couple minutes at the end. Terrence said to me that the hour-long podcasts, new people don't click on hour-long podcasts. It makes sense. It's fucking news to me, but it makes sense. And it's true. The podcasts that I really love are, 14 minutes long, like the New York Times, The Daily, every morning. So we're going to go to a shorter pod, 30 minutes max, to hopefully bring in more listeners. We've been dropping every Sunday for 52 fucking weeks. That's mostly me. I got to just be straight up with you. Setting up interviews, emailing, coordinating it with the person, setting up the time, and then making it happen. I have this board set up on my desk in my loft with the mic and the Adobe Audition, and I physically called them, and I'm running the board by myself while I'm doing this interview. And this is every week so that I can deliver this content every Sunday. And it's hard, and it's gratifying and awesome, and it's fucking hard. And so we're going to go every 2 weeks starting on this next season, if you will. Every other week, and it might not be on Sundays anymore. Maybe Sundays doesn't make sense. I have no idea. Maybe it's Monday morning. Now it's on your commute into work. thing. I know some people were downloading it that way, but maybe people aren't subscribing and they just want to click on it one time and listen every Monday. That's fine. So we are going to reimagine when it drops. And, it's going to probably take us 4 to 6 weeks, maybe even more, to get this new form in place, to get a bunch of episodes recorded and ready to go. And so, in closing this episode, I ask you guys to hang with us. Those of you that are still listening, those of you that are still subscribing, hang with us. We're not going to be gone forever, but it is going to be. There's going to be some quiet. Some radio silence for a while. And just know that radio silence is, I'm not taking a break. I'm actually just about to work even harder to make this thing that much better, so that we can just take it to further places. I got to give a shout out too. I kind of forgot about, I didn't forget, I just haven't mentioned 2 really important components to the podcast. Jonathan Drexler was our social media manager for many months, almost 4 months. Jonathan put in a ton of work, and I thank him for that. It was invaluable. I need a new social media manager. The Instagram page is it's hard for me to manage while I do all my own work and raise a family. So there's going to be a team so I bring that up because, yeah, exactly that. There's going to be a team that we're looking to build. Right now, essentially, there is myself, there is Chris Piccioni, our producer, and then there's Jordan Miller. And Jordan is another, and she's an amazing component. He makes all the videos that you guys have been able to see, which haven't been that many. It's only been about a dozen for our 50 episodes, but we're working on it. He's in Chicago, running his own career at Way Up Creative, and he also manages JC Rivera, and so he's busy, but he's a pivotal member of the team. And then I have a whole lot of different people that add guidance. But what we're looking to do is truly build out a team once we get the rebrand, refresh going. And that'll be, sort of a street team, letterheads kind of thing we're talking about. We're going to have takeovers. People will take over the Instagram page for a week. We're probably going to play with the form. Every once in a while, we may go back to that oral history with the part 2s, because I have people like Wrath and Yes, Reno's part 2, Daver, the Bio, we want to do a part 2, Part, Twick, Apex. There's so many people who we didn't want to rush through, so we did a shorter timeline, and I want to honor those guys by bringing them back and doing their part 2s. So every once in a while, you may get that hour-long oral history episode, but for the most part, the form is going to stay in this new shape, whatever we discover. I never intended this episode to be 39 minutes long, so I will wrap this up, but I want you guys to know that actually just all this blabbing that I just did was in honor of you guys, in honor of the podcast and the listeners, because I think it's I think what I'm doing is important. And I think that it adds value to our to cultures in general, and by celebrating our graph culture, I think that it immediately gives it more value in popular culture. People don't know these stories. They know what graph is, street art. They love it. They want to slap it on their corporate fucking, meeting room walls. But there's so much more to it. And that's one of the things that I've been trying to do here is to honor that and celebrate that. But I honor and celebrate you guys for listening. Again, it wouldn't be anything if you weren't listening. And so, and again, with those numbers down, we want to get more people listening. And so we're about to take a chance at reshaping it to do that. Not sure what else to say, except I thank you guys. It's been a fucking crazy year. It's going to be this next coming year of episodes is going to be exciting, and I really look forward to it. And I hope you guys do too. Share this fucking podcast, please. Subscribe to it, even when we're down. Make other people subscribe. And the more people that subscribe, the further this podcast can go. So if you want it to go forward, subscribe it. Grab your sister's phone, subscribe it there. Grab your mom's phone, subscribe it there. Anyway, that's it. Signing out. Thank you. And there will be one more episode next week, the final episode 52 before we take our break. Hope you guys enjoyed that too. It's going to be interesting. Peace. My Life in Letters is looking to grow and expand our team. If you think you're right to collaborate and partner with us, please drop us a line at either mylifeinletterspodcast@gmail.com or send us a direct message at our Instagram page at My Life in Letters Podcast. My Life in Letters is recorded live in Bushwick, Brooklyn, USA. Our sponsor is sprayplanet.com. Our producer is Christopher Piccioni. Our videographer is Jordan Miller for Way Up Creative. Our intern is Jessica McGarr. Our theme music is by Fonte. And my name is Adam Fujita. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Peace.
The language of letters.